Hello, and welcome to an episode of Dualistic Unity Raw. It is Thursday, which means that this is a shortish episode. So, without any further ado, let's just get into the shit, shall we? I think it's kind of funny because a big part of what you hear, I guess, in the self help community and all of that is, like really got to find people to resonate with, find people to express yourself with, find people who can share what you're going through. Find a group, find your tribe, find that support network, find all that. And I honestly, as much as I see the value in it, and the value really is security and comfort and feeling a little less alone. I mean, that's really what it is. But there's also a cost there. The cost is that you never actually get over the need to share your shit. You never actually get over the need to have people to support you. And I think that's a large part of why the problem doesn't go away. A big part of my own growth over the years has been the recognition that it's my growth. It's not on anyone else. And it's entirely possible that they don't know any better than I do what my growth means. And a big part of why I just kind of stopped talking to people about all of this stuff, and by this stuff, I also just mean my stuff. The things that I was facing, the recognitions I was going through, the things that I wanted to share and express and all of that. It really dawned on me that it's mine to deal with. And so there was a period of time where I just didn't share that stuff. It's not that I didn't share. Of course, the pendulum swung for a little bit. So I went from, needing to share it all the time, thinking that was what the healthiest thing for me to do was, to not sharing it at all, thinking once again that absolutes are the way to go. And they're not. But eventually, you come to this kind of middle line where you realize that all of the shit that you go through in your head is yours to deal with and to learn from. And we are all in that boat together. We are all facing very much the same things, but in our own unique and personal way. And I think that's the point, is that we can share the generalities, but to constantly need to share the specifics really is a way out of getting not having accountability for those specifics ourselves. I guess what I'm saying is deal with your shit. More or less. It's not to say that you can't talk to people about your shit or open up or have a moment, but really, how much do you need them to be there for you? How much is it just you not wanting to look at it, reconcile it, and maybe just get over it? Maybe just stop taking it so hard, taking it so seriously, and making it so important. Maybe just the recognition that maybe it's not that fucking important. Maybe you're just making it about you. Maybe you're just being self-absorbed. Maybe that's all it is. And nobody's going to help you reconcile that. As long as you're going to them to talk about it, you're not just dealing with it, taking it in, feeling what that feels like, and then moving on. Right? And I guess that's the point. There's a balance, I guess, is what I'm saying. Expressing yourself to others is wonderful. It's the reason we have the groups, is because expression itself is part of the process of whatever it is you're doing. But it's not about expressing yourself to others. It's allowing others to learn from your expression, sure, not because you're trying to teach them, but because they're always processing themselves as well. But it really is just about you dealing with your shit. And you can. You're going to be okay. It just feels hard at first, especially when we spend so much time thinking that, having a collective of people around us to help carry the burden is what's best for us, when in fact, we're just not gaining the strength that we could otherwise.
Yeah. And that sense of validation for your choices, the decisions that you make, like realizing that all the choices you make are your choices too. Like if someone mentions something or you look to someone else to make a decision, like it's still you making that decision. Just because they maybe suggested something or recommended something doesn't mean that there's any responsibility for that choice being made to pass off to anyone else. Like, you're still always making choices for yourself throughout your life. Like, every decision that you make, even if you're, looking to some person, looking up to some person, looking to someone else who you think has something figured out, like, there are no guarantees of that one way or the other. And people don't need more carbon copies of the same types of people running around. Like the Andrew Tate craze. He had an incentive to create a bunch of Andrew Tates because he was at the top of that. And so, kids will see someone like that and then be like, oh, well, they're clearly living the best way and the right way. And so you kind of like just try to match what that person is doing, living how they're living. And it's like, no, you on your own as yourself is the best thing that you could ever offer anyone. And not passing off, this idea that it's on anyone else to go through things, to make choices, to make decisions. And I think the more you look to other people, to make those or not to make the decisions, but to ask what's best or what they would recommend. It's like each and every time, yeah, find a balance in that, but there is some degree of a passing of making choices for yourself. And even when you do look around, it's still making choices for yourself. And there can be points, I think, where you realize how much you look to others, and when you aren't necessarily getting validation from anyone, anyone in your life, like you maybe lived in a certain specific way that was validated by those around you, and then you start doing things that aren't quite the same, feeling like you're making more decisions for yourself, but people don't understand it. Like being able to go through those periods and just continue on through them, like continue to have faith in yourself that like things are playing out in a way, like you don't have to keep wondering how you're doing or like how things are going or how well the decisions you're making are going to play out in the future. But there can be, the shift in the focus from making every choice about you to not. Like, it's okay. Like, I feel like sometimes when we start looking at rules or like right ways to act or correct ways to be, there can be almost, you can tie yourself up in the sense that, oh, I've noticed how much I've always relied on being a nice person to act, to guide me. And if you see that as, oh, I kind of took that to an extreme, you can throw the baby out with the bathwater and like assume that it's never okay to like help someone else, and not like help someone else, but just like be nice, give someone a compliment, like mention something that you noticed in them or how they're acting. Like that's okay to do. And I've definitely noticed in my own life how much I kind of will go to extremes with things, like make things black and white, notice something and then be like, oh, I gotta stop doing that thing, instead of letting it remain kind of gray and looking at, oh, I recognized that, and so at least I'm aware of it now. Like that's a big shift, and you don't have to double triple down into like eradicating that side of yourself from your life because you noticed that you had sort of a tendency to focus on it a little bit more. It's not necessary to act in the extremes so much.
I think an important consideration is just that you don't really pass your decision making to anybody, because whether or not you're taking credit for the source of that, you're still the one that's making that choice, right? So if someone says, hey, you know what, you should have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich right now, I could still at any point be like, no, But I could also say, yes, I'm going to have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich right now. And as I'm eating the sandwich, it's not that I didn't make a choice to eat this sandwich right now. It's Billy told me to eat this peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And because the idea or the recommendation or the suggestion came from someone else, now that's no longer my choice because I wasn't the source of the idea. And I think that's just something to keep in mind, is that you don't pass the decision to someone else. You're still always making that decision, even if the source of the idea for that decision came from someone else. It's in the same way of like how it doesn't make sense to be like, you made me so angry. It's like, did you, or was it that I got upset and I didn't want to take responsibility for being the source of that frustration because my expectation wasn't met? And so I'm going to say that you made me have an emotion. You can't. I mean, you could say that, but it really doesn't make sense. No one makes you feel a feeling in the same way that someone doesn't make your decisions for you. But it's in our sayings, it's in our culture. And so it seems like passing the buck is such a common thing to do that it feels like you're doing it, but you're not. Your feelings come from you and all of your decisions come from you, even if you want to credit someone else.
Yeah, but not if it's based on need. I think that's the point, right? Like, was it Billy that offered you the peanut butter sandwich? Okay, so Billy offers you the peanut butter sandwich and you have a yes or no decision.
Right.
But what if you need Billy to like you?
Right.
So immediately now you don't feel like it's your decision, because if you don't do it, Billy's not going to like you. And obviously that's the right thing to do, right?
Right.
So if it's the right thing to do, then you have to do it.
Yep.
To not do it is ridiculous. And this is what I've referred to as living relative to people. You're living relative to their perception of you.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of making your own choices, you are abdicating that choice to them.
Yep.
It's still your choice to do so.
Always.
But because there's that lack of responsibility, it's no longer your choice.
Yeah. Like somehow you are now powerless. And I like the, when you brought up like, what do you do? Like, do you do compliment? And it's like, it's not the action itself in the same way that it's not the words. It's where are the words coming from? Where is the action coming from? Because that lets you know what the priority is. Are you, you complimented this dress that I'm wearing right now. When you first saw it, you're like, I like that dress, and I was like, well, thank you. It's one of my summer dresses. I love dresses. I didn't think that you were complimenting the dress because you thought that I wanted to be complimented, or that you thought that by complimenting the dress, I would like you more as a friend. I didn't think that. I thought that you genuinely liked the pattern of the flowers and you noticed it, complimented it, and it was done. I didn't think that it was coming from a need. I thought it was coming from a genuine appreciation, but if you had questioned whether or not, to say that compliment, you could have stopped yourself because you thought, oh no, there I go again, trying to look like a nice person or be a nice person. I don't think you thought about that at all. You saw something, you registered it in your environment, and you responded without any need. And that was my perception of something that just happened before this call.
It's funny because I don't ever try to be nice. Like I'm not a big fan of the word nice, as it very much implies kind of a persona, a mask, a specific way of doing things.
A type of person.
Mm-hmm.
But I do enjoy being very light and empathetic with myself. And I enjoy when I choose a t-shirt, for example, I'm like, that's a dope t-shirt. And I just remind myself when I look at it, I'm like, that's a dope t-shirt.
Yeah.
So when I see somebody and they're wearing a dope t-shirt, I don't hesitate. I'm like, that is a dope t-shirt. The idea of them isn't even there outside of the recognition that they're very much like me, and that they said very much a similar thing to themselves when they left the house today.
Yeah.
Right. And all I'm doing is playing the part, not out of thought, not out of any desire to have an impact, because they could be like, I don't really like it. They could do anything. I don't care.
Right.
I don't care.
It might not even be their shirt. They could have slept over a friend's house and in borrowing a shirt. You have no idea where that shirt came from. None of that matters.
No, because you're feeling light and there's nothing wrong with anything you say. See, that's the thing. There's nothing wrong with anything you say. There's no right thing to say because you're not trying to be a specific kind of person. So whatever bubbles to the surface is what you're going to say.
Yeah.
But we have such an issue with that because we're like, but is it the right thing to say? And that's that old mentality again. That's where all the shit comes from, because with that pressure, all of a sudden there are different things you say than when there aren't pressure. You know, when you feel the pressure to be something right, you rip everyone else down for not being right. When that pressure's gone, you lift everyone else up because you're lifting yourself up. It's not even about them so much as just living with no weight or less weight, so you don't add to the collective weight.
Yeah.
But that's what we're all doing. We're dragging our weight to the party.
And like a lot of interactions can be kind of surrounded or focused on just people dealing with each other's weight all the time. Like that's kind of how I thought of the retreats early on. It was like, oh, you know, we got some weight, people are coming with some weight, we're going to talk about our weight, we're going to get through it, and everyone's going to leave a little bit lighter because we worked through our weight. And this sort of like process, like there was a purpose to it. And that's been such a I think it can be a massive part of anyone's life, that like, oh, well, there has to be a reason, you know, there has to be something about me that's going to be improved based on the actions that I take, the things that I do. And I think I'm realizing in myself how much like that sense of like self-improvement runs so deep. You know, it goes hand in hand with, you know, selfishness, narcissism, all that stuff, where it's like if you're so focused on self-improvement, then your whole life very much becomes about you. And then the optimal thing to do is to always, you know, do something that's going to improve yourself. And that'll go for interactions too. Like you have interactions to get something out of it. And I think the more you're trying to, you know, play a role, play a character, show a certain face, the more pressure there's going to be to say the right words, you know, to act a certain way. And there's a spectrum there where because you can't escape, you know, yourself and how you're acting and what you're doing and the choices that you make and the focuses. And you can try to escape that by coming up with a character, by trying to play a persona. It's like, you know, can act like this, but then, you know, act like this in these situations, and then act like this in these situations. And that desire to be liked, or the desire to not be disliked, like if that's a focus, like you're not going to be relaxed. You're not going to be cool with yourself. You're going to be trying to calculate every single thing that you do,
and pissing everyone off in the process.
And making
the funniest part about it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You know, if I don't do the right thing, nobody's going to like me. And in the effort to do the right thing, everyone gets tired of you using them, because you are. They have to play a part for you to be doing the right thing. So it's a hell of a demand on them.
Oh, massive weight on everyone else. And that that idea that even that you have to do certain like extra things more than just like what's going on in your life and the focuses, and like bringing things like the needs for you back to basics of like, you know, am I eating food? Am I sleeping all right? How's work been going? How's, you know, relationships, not out of a need, but just because it's something to do, you know, something, a way to spend time. Like when you bring things back to that, like life has more of a way of making sense. And as soon as you start coming up with stories about yourself, like how you've been, what you've been through, what you haven't been through, what you should have gone through or shouldn't have gone through, like you'll start adding these extra things on top of that. And I think that's a lot of the self-improvement industry, is like adding things to the already very full experience of life, and just, you know, going about your day and paying attention and doing the things you got to do, and not spanning too far from that with all these extra things that you got to, you know, make sure you get your rigid routine set, because if you deviate from that even just a little bit, you know, everything's going to fall apart. Like, no, are you doing the basics? Are you focusing on that? If you wanted to use some structure to get those things done, to have those things, like finding a balance with that and some sensitivity, but then not going past that into, well, I gotta do more. I gotta become more. I gotta make up for this with this by doing this extra thing. It's like, no, enough with the making up for certain things. Just like let that drop right now and be attentive to where you're at. What can you do right now? Like, what can you focus on right now? Like, what things can you do that'll inform your life, that'll, help you get the needs done, the needs of like food, water, shelter, work, all that done in the moment, and basing your life off of that instead of these assumptions about yourself that you gotta overcome or you gotta fix or you gotta make better or improve. Like, what if your life didn't have anything to do with you and how you were doing and you could just live it? And I think that's when things start feeling a lot less heavy, when not everything is about you, but you have the ability to do all those things.
Right.
Without,
And not the individual you. I remember driving when I remember just driving. I don't know if it was to a friend's house or I was running errands, but I was just driving and it was like right about dusk. And so the sun was setting and the clouds and the colors in the sky were like a pink and purple and blues. And I'm driving on this highway and there's these hills that I once called mountains. And I really thought they're named mountains, but they're hills. Now that I know what real mountains are, because I'm on the island. But that's a side note. But I was driving, and it just felt so incredibly full, and I felt like I was the road that I was driving on. I felt like I was the car that I was driving in. Holding the steering wheel felt so. I don't know, felt like holding my own hand to some degree, and everybody that was driving on the road felt as much me as the skin as the driver, that I felt like I also was, and I felt like the sky and the hills and everything. It just felt like I was everything in that moment because I couldn't distinguish between myself and my quote unquote environment. I felt so in tune, I felt so connected, I felt so in touch with everything, and so it felt like I was that whole moment. And how do I know the difference? How could I say that I'm just in this moment and that I'm not just as much everything that I'm seeing? And so the saying, the observer and the observed are the same thing, came to mind when I was on that road driving, and I cried because I felt so, I don't know, it just felt like the observer and the observed are the same thing because there is no difference. It's all just existence here right now. And so as much as, I'm not always thinking about the individual, I'm not taking things individually or taking things personally, it does feel like I am prioritizing me, but me feels so full and so much more than just the driver. It felt like the driver couldn't be there without the road couldn't be there without the driver, the car, the scene, the everything. Like, the observer could not be there without the observed, in the same way that the observed could not be there without the observer. And so it felt like everything was everything, so it's like I am taking me seriously. Me has just gotten a lot more expanded. I don't want to say bigger, but I just want to say like it feels more expanded.
Yeah. And with that, like, there's nothing you have to do, to add to anyone else's, or like add weight to anyone else.
Add more
like,
to existence. You just do that little thing.
Right. It's like you got to make something or create something in order to, have sway. It's like, no, you can be yourself. You can be cool with what you're bringing to the table. Be cool and like.
You don't have to have conflict, right? Because I feel like cool implies like a pleasantness to it, and it's not always pleasant. But it's like, I'm not in conflict with this moment. That's cool.
Yeah, exactly. And like that's what you get, moment to moment. You don't have to try and be more or like do something to add to that necessarily. It's like you're enough as you are, you're capable, of doing a lot more than you probably assume. You couldn't even assume. You start assuming what you can and can't do, and then it becomes very limited. And doubling down on that assumption that like, oh, I can do this, I can't do this. Like you don't really know. You don't really know what you're capable of until you start doing more stuff, until you start trying new things. Like you're afraid of talking to someone at the bar, like go talk to someone at the bar and then do that again and then do that again. Like I think in the world right now with conveniences and whatnot, that sense of there being like a silver bullet can be so prevalent that the reality of like, no, you want to become a better, have more enjoyable social interactions, just like stop trying to make them better and just like show up as you are. Like you're enough to do that, but like keep doing it. Like don't sit back and try and figure out how to do it. Like how, looking up YouTube videos, like how to have better conversations.
How to life is what we're asking.
Pretty much. And like someone
like,
give me a guide. And those are the guides we look around for: religion, society.
But you couldn't, even if let's say you did ask for a guide, nobody could give you that guide, because your guide would need to be specific to all of your circumstances, to all of your changing perspectives. And so you would be the only one who'd be able to write the guide that would be most useful to you. It's just like the self-help books, right? You're going to this book, you're thinking it's going to be a silver bullet. You're thinking that someone else is going to be able to have the answer for how you should live your life in a way that would be most fulfilling. And it's like, what makes life fulfilling? Seeing that every moment is already full and just not creating lack where there isn't. We don't know anything. I don't know how people are feeling, but I can suspect that someone in our comments is feeling frustrated and is trying to prove a point and not really having a conversation or a discussion where they're open to a conflicting, or not even disagreement doesn't require conflict, but you won't even be open to listening to another perspective that's different than your own, because all you see is conflict. All you see is someone that is not validating your perspective. And it's like, that's not a discussion, that's a lecture. If you want to lecture people on your perspective, book a community center. Fill the seats, man. But if you're not having a scheduled lecture, conversations aren't lectures. No one's looking for you to, to just sell them your points. But we can talk about the many different perspectives and how they all contain information that can be useful if you make use of it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And like just having the willingness and the openness to not hold things so tightly, but to still like hold some things, like have some perspectives that are your own, like have some points of view, like have some opinions, like have fun with those, instead of just like, oh no, I have no favorites, I have no opinions, I have no things that I'm focusing on learning or points of view and whatnot. And I think there can be a balance between learning things for a reason, learning something to have something to share or to have something to say, versus learning something because it's interesting and it fulfills your life, reading something because you find it interesting, not so that you can then express it to someone else or have some talking point at a dinner party, but just
I'm well read,
Yeah. Have you seen my bookshelf over there? I've read like 3 of them out of the 500. And like, but being willing to do things for the sake of doing them, like our chat right now, like doing this for the sake of having the conversation, like reading a book because you want to read it. Like I avoided reading any fictional books. Like I could not even fathom wrapping my head around reading a fiction book for like a decade, because I couldn't compute. It just didn't make any sense. It wasn't, improving me or that idea of what I had figured out or what I, thought I was doing. And yet something like that, like when it comes to uncertainty, when it comes to false certainty, like, if you have an inclination, you find a book and you're like, oh, seems kind of interesting, this is a cool story. Like, just reading that and being willing to not know like how it'll impact your life. You know, you might meet someone who's read the same book and then you have a whole chat with them, and you know, it means nothing about you still, but then that, you know, informs something else. And just, you know, taking things in for your own reasons, you know, speaking for your own reasons, doing things for your own reasons without making it about you. And I think having that balance is, yeah, helpful, very helpful to keep in mind, that you can do things and read things and learn things for yourself, you know, not for some future situation, but, you know, also find a balance between, you know, doing it because, you know, it's going to make you more a better person.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's why, you know, it when I hear people saying like, oh, I'm a good person, or in certain instances, you know, I follow a very strict diet, it's like, okay, do you feel better now? You know, because at the end of the day, there are so many examples in science and mathematics and in so many other topics where we thought we knew something that we considered irrefutable and absolute, and then a new piece of information was discovered and it rocks that topic. And so, you know, when we talk about plants and animals and sentience, you know, I loved that we had learned that a trait that we attributed only to us and animals is exhibited by plants, which is recognizing their kin, recognizing their children, you know. And we thought that only animals and only people could do that, but trees have been proven to be able to recognize their own young. And let's say a virus is sweeping through that forest, they will make it so that I think their roots and the mycelium that they're connected to, and that's how the trees are communicating to each other, because they have words. And they will make it more difficult. They'll send a warning to their offspring, like something's coming, like be careful, like pull your roots away. But then they will pull themselves away from their kids. But they will also share nutrients with their kin. And, you know, so if they see that the child tree is not getting enough nutrients, it'll send it through the mycelium network that's underneath it and connecting it. And then we learned that mushrooms can, you know, have a language about 25 words. And it's like, if things can talk to each other and recognize their children and provide them with nutrients and warnings, you know, that is leaning more towards sentient than not. And it's like, well, why couldn't we consider that? Or is our human intellectual prowess so fragile that we couldn't have something that we considered not sentient all of a sudden, like that's on the table? Does that frighten us so much? You know, and it's just like that, like the fact that we can't even have a conversation about, oh, well, maybe that could be possible. It's like, no, we're certain. And that's it. You're just foolish. And you should just listen to me because I'm the expert and I clearly know more than you. It's like, do you feel better now? Because that's not a conversation. That's a lecture. And you don't even seem to be enjoying it, which is just a shame. To just not even be able to enjoy sharing information. That's all we're really doing, is sharing information. No one needs to be an expert to do that.
Yeah. And like, because that's something then you're holding on to really tightly. And like, in a world that feels so black and white with things, it's either, you know, you're learning something or you know it, you're a master, you got it, you figured it out. You know, you're either teaching someone else or you're learning from someone else. And I think just leaving everything open-ended, you know, it's like for, you know, diets and whatnot. It's like, right now I'm doing this. It makes me feel good. I feel this way about things. Like, I can keep that to myself. Like, that's cool for me. It doesn't have to be this thing where it's like, yeah, a massive ethical stand where it's like, because what's the real reason you want other people to be, you know, have the diet that you do? Like, you want more validation that you're doing the right thing. You just want to feel like you're doing the right thing.
Oh, there's so much more than diet here. Listen to this. I mean,
right.
Let's dive in.
All right,
good.
Here we go. We've had a nice chat in the comments. You can check
Veganism
out.
is an ethical stand against enslavement and torture, commodification of innocent sentient beings. Focus on the victims. focus on the victims. Oh my God, this person practically carries around a soapbox with them. This is fantastically
when they're not carrying that cross to bear.
Soapbox to go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Save the animals.
Yeah.
Save
Well, they
the
stand on the
animals.
cross. You
And
know, they
it's-
pile it up.
They put it up with the,
such-
they pitch it up with the soapbox.
But it's such a little corner to hide in, because
Yeah.
basically you're like, I know exactly what the biggest problem on this planet is, and obviously it's the killing and enslavement of animals, not the desperate egotistical judgment that I'm exercising right fucking here that's led to us not realizing animals have any sentience, not giving a shit outside of how it makes us a profit or makes us feel superior or how it makes us feel like we're more. And so while you're still sitting here going, oh, this is the absolute right way and it makes me so much better, you're contributing to the problem. You are the fucking problem. I'm sorry to say it that way, but you are. And I love the fact that you keep misspelling planets. Plants. Plants have sentience. They feel pain. They communicate things. Trees can tell what color shirt you're wearing.
Yeah.
Feel free to do some research, because there's plenty out there, more than probably the stuff that you read however long ago. I'm going to say 5-10 years ago, because you're just depending on a certain amount of information that makes you feel superior and safe and better than everybody else. Like you have the answer to everything, and it makes you just fucking dreadful. Dreadful as a human being. Nobody wants to talk to somebody like that. And so you're never going to get your point across. You lack empathy for any of the people that you are trying to push your so-called empathy onto. It's sad. You're literally working against the very thing that you say you want to fix just so you can feel self-important.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to look into plants being able to communicate. You don't want to look into plants having any degree of sentience, because then the problem is so much more complicated for you. Suddenly, the whole world is something you have to consider instead of just this one thing that makes you a social warrior. It's sad to see you. It's so engaged, and you're not even listening as any of this is happening, because you are so dependent on this idea of yourself. And you don't realize that's the problem. That's the problem. And, good for you. I'm glad that you've decided to choose a different diet. But I need you to understand that this idea of yourself being superior, it's going to linger no matter what you eat, because you are desperate, and it sounds desperate.
Oh yeah, big time. And that's where cognitive dissonance comes into play. It's like, oh, it's on the person sharing the information to provide all of this proof and documentation. It's like, no, you just don't want to look at the fact that maybe there is more to the picture. Maybe it's not this black and white silver bullet, like, oh, I just gotta do this, it's the right way. I create all of these videos and content around this concept, and it means this about me, and I know that I'm correct, and et cetera, et cetera. It's like, no, you walk past a plant and you see a leaf and you pluck the leaf. It's like there's pain that happens there. It's on a different scale, just like, a lot of people assume animal and human pain is on a different scale, but like you can't not hear it. Like, I'll say it again, like when you pluck a plant out of the ground, like it screams, it feels pain, it goes through those things, and you don't have to want to admit that to yourself. You don't have to want to accept that maybe is a possibility. You can look at that and be like, no, you guys are just full of shit. You're just trying to get me to change, and it's part of the argument. And it's like, or you can be like, well, maybe there is something there, and look into it. But, that brings into question a lot of the ways that you feel better about yourself, because that's what happens when that, guarantee, that false certainty kind of goes away. Everything becomes gray area. Oh, maybe there's no, ripple-less actions that I can take in the world. Maybe everything has a push and a pull to it. And if you're rigidly holding on to, no, this is the right way, there's going to be very little sensitivity to the reality of how much there's push and pull with everything. And so maybe there's no black and white. Maybe there's no silver bullets. Maybe there's no ideal 100% correct way to live or correct next decision to make. Maybe it's always gray, and the more you're paying attention to how you're feeling, the less you're putting on others, the less heavy you're making everyone else's life by trying to convince them that they should be living differently, and they are doing something inherently wrong by not living the way that you're living. Like, that's a lot to put on the world. That's a lot of weight to add, making everything about you and your just incessant desire to be right or feel okay with, the choices that you make. Like, you don't need everyone else's validation or other people to agree with what you're doing to get cool with, the choices that you make for yourself. But it can help by being a little bit open to even wondering if, maybe everything I believe to be true in the right way isn't, completely objectively 100% correct. Just maybe it's not. Maybe there's something else.
Right. And, it sounds like with an ethical stand, it's not that eating meat is the problem. It's the way that we get to the eating meat. It's the torture. It's the farming practices. It's that's the problem. And it's like, well, what's driving the way that we are currently treating the animals? It's this tunnel vision mindset. It's got to be this. It's my way or the highway. It's that kind of mentality that drives us to treat the animals in the way that we are. So veganism is still embodying that self-centered, I know the best way. It's my way or the highway. All of you, everyone else must be wrong. And so you all should listen to me. It's that same energy. It's that same mentality. And yet I don't think that similarity is seen, because now that it's an ethical stand, it must be that, I just happen to know the best way. And this time, I actually am the person who's right about that. It's like, are you? Because you sound just as self-assured as the people who are quote unquote abusing the animals. They think that that is the best way. They think that they are sure that they know what they should be doing with their time and with their choices. And so how is your mentality any different than the people that you're criticizing?
Yeah, it's not at all, meaning it's from.
Well, we don't talk about the mentality that drives these choices that we're criticizing. No, we're just criticizing the choice itself, and everyone should just stop doing it. Okay, exactly. That's very black and white.
Well, this person's just labeled themselves a human supremacist, because that's exactly how they sound at the moment. Because, everything other than the things that they've decided have sentience don't. Animals only have sentience, and they keep saying, like, provide proof. And I've already said, like, we're live streaming. This isn't a show about plant sentience, but go and do some research. Go and check out peer-reviewed papers. There's plenty of them. Like, you keep saying, oh, provide it. It's not my job to do due diligence for you. I'm telling you, there's information out there. And instead of just throwing a tantrum because it threatens your entire worldview, if you had any courage or any actual ethical perspective on how you want to live rather than it just being about you, you would go and do the research yourself. You are more than welcome to do that. But until then, you just sound like a hypocrite. Like, you're saying, oh, you're commodifying murder and the enslavement. And meanwhile, you're just segregating your murder to a specific type of life form. Like, I don't view you as being compassionate. I view you as being self-important. Like, this is about you and how much you can judge other people. There's nothing in that that's compassionate or empathetic. I mean, that in itself, the way you treat people is evidence of how you truly feel about animals and everything else. You don't respect animals. You look down on them. You look down on them like somehow you are superior. Right? That's it. You are superior and they need my help. They need my protection. How do you feel about the people around you? Because the people in this conversation are looking at you as being just somebody who's extremely divisive, somebody who's self-absorbed, somebody who's just desperate for something to make them feel like they are superior to other people, to justify their need to judge. That doesn't help anyone. But I appreciate you being around, and I doubt very much you will do any research whatsoever into plants being able to communicate or trees being able to see you. I doubt very much you will, but I do hope you will. I hope that you have some conviction in your desire to be empathetic, because that will yield more and more questions and you will continue to grow. The fact is that knowing that plants are sentient makes my life way more complicated than yours. You just want to stick to something that makes it very simple while you continue to hurt other things, but you don't want to look at it. So it's interesting. Somebody else is here like, oh, sentience is a spectrum. Plants are sentient, but less than animals with more complex neural systems. The same argument could be made for you versus animals, that you have greater sentience. So again, you just sound like a hypocrite. exactly what spectrum are you trying to get rid of here? Are you trying to just recognize and protect and respect life as a whole? Because you both sound contradictory at this point, and it really does just sound like it's about you. But that said, we are the end of this Raw episode. Had a blast. We're going to be back on Sunday, 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern time. If you would like to come back, we can continue this conversation. We
Yes.
also have a call-in show every 2 weeks on Tuesday, where I would love to argue the diet of veganism, and I would love to talk about the benefits and the mentality that drives it, and whether or not you are actually doing what you want to do, or if it's just about you posturing for your own sake. But that's it for me, everyone. I'll pass it over back to Andrew and Amanda. Thank you so much for fielding the majority of this episode while I was dealing with the comment section and having quite a lot of fun doing so.
Yeah, we are available frequently to have conversations. And so, yeah, feel free to hop at dualistunity.com. There's a group schedule there. There's a call schedule. So if anyone wants to join in to a call-in show, talk for 10 minutes, join a roundtable, even get on Patreon, tier 2 plus, you can get into those. So like there are opportunities and live streams here. Like we're just here chatting and have a conversation. Like we'll interact with the comments, but we're not going to necessarily bow to someone's wishes of providing
what's funny is
evidence
that,
left and right, because
especially when they don't listen anyway.
Yeah.
We're like, there's plenty of evidence. Go and do your due diligence. And they're like, ha ha ha, you're running away. It's all about me. I'm so powerful. It's so sad.
Yeah, it's tough. But
Right.
Amanda.
I'm ready to transition